Okay, hey everyone. Today we've got a real treat for you. We've got some folks here, Coin and Hubble from BC Security, who are going to do a presentation on an introduction to CTFs. First off, I just want to highlight BC Security. They've been a perennial sponsor of the Red Team Village, and we are grateful for that and appreciative, and we're glad to have you here. So excited to get this started. My name is Billy. I'm a member of the Red Team Village. And just for ROEs, rules of engagement here, as we go through the briefing, please feel free to leave any comments you have, right in YouTube. We'll get them here, and then Hubble and Coin will be able to answer as we go along. So with that, over to you guys to introduce yourself and get going.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro. So if you guys haven't been on any of our webinars or workshops or anything, I'm Hubble. Also Jake. I'm the Red Team's lead for us at BC Security. I specialize in like operational technology stuff. I started off in the Air Force doing fighter tests, so cybersecurity tests for fighter aircraft, and then transitioned out and have been doing some operational technology stuff, traditional red teaming, that kind of thing. We have like a really strong focus on like operational enablement for organizations, along with like threat emulation. I'll hand it over to Anthony.
I'm Anthony. I go by Coin. I'm like the resident nerd. My background's electrical engineering, so anything wireless is super exciting to me. I also dabble in like AI, ML, like machine learning stuff. So, throwing those buzzwords that everybody uses these days with their EDRs, and that's kind of what I dabble in now. So, and that's it for us. I think everybody's ready to get started on this quick little introduction.
Yeah, so we're just this is meant to be like an intro webinar for like people that have never done a CTF before. So we're not going to go like deep diving into anything super off the wall in terms of like TTPs or like techniques or anything. But we know a lot of people are interested in doing CTFs, and it's like a really daunting thing to get started with, especially at somewhere like DEF CON, where there's lots of people that are very, very into it and very good at it and have been doing it for a long time. So we thought it'd be helpful to give people an idea of like, how do you prepare for a CTF as DEF CON approaches. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Anthony?
Nope, you got it.
Cool. So if you've never done a CTF before, it's a hacking competition to collect flags off of a network. Traditionally, sometimes it's a single box, sometimes it can be a network. But the flags are there. They are how you prove that you were able to access a certain part of the computer, a certain file, retrieve certain memory space, all those kinds of things. They're just like text strings basically that you put in that give the answer. They're really cool puzzles. One thing to note as we get through this, and we'll hit on it a couple of times, is like CTFs, while they are really good for showing off your hacking skills, and they are a good way of getting into the industry, making a name for yourself, a core part of them is that they're a puzzle, and they have specific things that are structured in a way that like the first time you do it may not make a lot of sense, but you'll see it carry through across a lot of CTFs. And so learning that style of puzzle and what they're looking for makes life a lot easier. So like reading write-ups and stuff can help you learn that aspect of it, because there's a lot of things in CTFs that won't work because it's intentionally broken because they want you to do it a different way, just little nuances like that.
Yeah, I would not equate CTFs to like essentially like a real pen test or a real red team assessment. They're very much gamified for a reason. So single path through is what they're aiming for. I remember me and Jake were on Discord with some people, and they asked questions like, why is Mimikatz not working on like Empire? And next thing we find out, it's a CTF box that has like LSAS like permanently disabled, so you can't do like certain things, and all these weird shenanigans that you would never actually find in like a real deployed environment.
Yeah, or like one of my my favorite stories to tell is because I started cyber in the military, I never really did any CTFs. I just got training from the military on how to do cyber and got into the industry that way. So the very first time I ever did a CTF was at a DEF CON after I just gotten off the stage speaking at Recon Village. We had done all this stuff like attacking Microsoft Outlook servers, and had found like some interesting things about the way they were doing sandboxing and a vulnerability in their sandbox. And so like we were walking down the hall after having just got off the stage, and some group came and was like, our person just dropped out. Like, would you be willing to like help us with our CTF?" And I was like, "Sure." I've never done one before, and I was utterly useless. Like I'm pretty sure they questioned the fact that I was wearing a speaker badge as like I was walking around, because I was just I'd never done anything in that context in that way, so I didn't even understand like what they were trying to get me to do when they were asking questions and stuff, like reading the prompts. So yeah, it's definitely a skill in and of itself. But there's a couple of different types of CTFs. There's Jeopardy style, which is basically they give you a huge long list of challenges and you just complete as many challenges as you can. And the challenges aren't necessarily linked together. You can do them like in some of them will be linked. You'll have to do one to get information about another one, but a lot of them are just built in a way that you can kind of, pick and choose which one you want to do. And those are really good for dividing up between teams. Like with specialties. And then there's attack and defense ones where you actually have like a server that's stood up that you are trying to defend while someone else is attacking you, and you're simultaneously trying to attack other people within the competition to gain information from their servers. And then you can do like a mix of both. So Anthony, you want to take over the platforms?
Sure. So there's a wide range of platforms if you're not familiar with CTFs. Especially if you're trying to get into things, it's kind of like, where do I find these? You have your easy ones that are kind of out there, like Hack the Box and Try Hack Me That. You just sign up and they kind of just deploy boxes for you, which is kind of like really nice. You start moving into like Vulnerability Hub, you're going to be downloading some VMs and deploying those. Or there's ones on like GitHub as well. People build them and they deploy Dockers, and you can go download the Dockers to go do those. But these are definitely fun to like get your hands like kind of like a little bit in the weeds on kind of like how these work. Some of them might be a little hard, so don't get frustrated.
Yeah, and there's one of the nice things about the platforms is especially some of the older boxes. Like I know VulnHub has a ton of write-ups for all of the boxes. And then Hack the Box, once a box gets retired, you'll have a bunch of people post write-ups of old boxes on how to do them. So it's a really nice place to go, and you can try yourself to do something and then go find a ton of write-ups on the internet and like walk through it step by step, because it is useful and kind of interesting to read like people's write-ups from like CTF competitions, but you don't necessarily have the machines in front of you to try and walk through it yourself to learn what they were like, what hints they were looking at, what they were seeing on the keyboard. You only have like what they wrote. So like I said, VulnHub and Hack the Box tend to have like a ton of write-ups. Try Hack Me is much more of a beginner one. The rooms typically have a write-up that goes with the room when you do it. That's like a walkthrough on how to do various things, which is really nice, especially if you're trying to learn. You start doing CTFs and you realize that like I know nothing about, like I'm super good at Active Directory exploitation, but I know nothing about web exploitation or how to do cross-site scripting or something like that. You can go to Try Hack Me and find like a specific room about that individual TTP and just kind of do like really focused learning. And then there's like just more stuff to look at. YouTube, there's tons of YouTube videos out there, tons of Discord stuff. Reddit's got a large active group, especially the security CTF. There's a bunch of stuff there. Hacking is like more general, and then NetSec's kind of more of a news site. Like it is interesting. You'll see some CTF stuff on there, but it's more of like a news feed about recent hacks and tools that people are building and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, we have our own Discord. We're more than happy to help you guys. Oh, Anthony finally figured out how to make comments, it looks like.
Well, sort of. I was trying to give the link, but I think links are disabled. So.
Oh, okay.
For the CTF
well,
challenge.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to get that. We'll like put it on Twitter or something after this. And then yeah, have you watched the IPsec videos, Anthony? I know he's super popular, but I haven't actually watched any of those.
I haven't watched a lot of his. I mean, I watched a lot of John Hammond, so
yeah,
I know people watch the IPsec one.
I know John Hammond was like when we were coming up, so I don't know if there's someone newer that's the more prolific person now, since a lot of John Hammond stuff's gotten a little old. Still very useful, but definitely a little older now. So I'll let Anthony take this one because he's definitely much better at web exploitation than me.
Thanks. So we're gonna go over a couple like different examples of like what you would find in a CTF to kind of like get some familiarity with things. So typically, like in a CTF thing, you're gonna find some sort of like web exploitation. That's like almost guaranteed. Like this is like the bread and butter when it comes to these things. You're gonna find something where you have to do like some sort of SQL injection to get past like a password or query a database. maybe you're using like a ticket and you're trying to forge something to get to another web page, or even coming down to like maybe some sort of remote code execution or like command injection on the website. So if you're not familiar with like what all those words mean, SQL, is kind of like a database language. If you don't do good sanitation on the front end, you can kind of inject in commands when they do the search. So you have that login and that password bar. That's where you see that like 1=1 stuff, and then you comment stuff out. That's kind of where that all comes from. There's kind of a little example on the right to kind of give you guys an idea, kind of what that would look like. And then the challenge that I have for you guys, you'll have a CTF thing to kind of play around with it. Oh, perfect. And they posted the link. So if you get a chance to
from
go,
the ticker at the bottom now.
perfect. So now you guys can go check it out. I put together a CTF for everybody. It's got a few little small challenges, very beginner level on the challenges. But once again, this is kind of an intro thing to kind of get you guys kind of thinking about how CTFs work. And then you could try some harder ones on like some of those other sites.
Yeah, and then something that I kind of thought of while you're talking, Anthony, because I think we did this for the challenge we built last year, of something to keep in mind for CTFs is sometimes you'll see like quote unquote like old school techniques that aren't really used anymore in like real life situations. Things like inspecting the HTML to look for like comments like or a password in the HTML code. I don't think I've seen what that actually happen in real life in like 10, 15 years, but um, but like you'll still see CTFs where like inspecting the HTML has like hints to what you're supposed to be doing in the CTF. So some of those more basic things that you wouldn't do anymore in like an actual pen test or something like that are still worth checking, because sometimes there's hints and stuff there. Like I said, like we keep repeating, like a lot of it is the more you do them, the more you'll kind of have an idea of where to go look to start with, and that'll help.
Yeah, it's a gamified aspect.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so reverse engineering is also something that's super common in CTFs. There are entire CTFs built around just doing reverse engineering. So it's definitely like a worthy skill to have. We did. I can't remember if this is in the tips or tricks thing, but since this is up here with IDA Pro and like Ninja and Ghidra, now that that's out, one thing to keep in mind is you might see tools that are really popular to use and like write-ups or what everyone's using, but the most effective tool is a tool that you're good at using. So like everyone uses Burp for the most part, like Burp Suite um, for doing stuff, but I still use Fiddler a lot of times for web traffic, just because for whatever reason, when I was learning how to do like web traffic manipulation, Fiddler was the tool that I learned how to use, and I'm much more effective with Fiddler than I am with Burp Suite. So just because like that is the popular tool, if you have a tool that works for you, there's nothing wrong with using that tool. Just understand the limitations of it. There may be a reason that no one's using that tool, but just something to keep in mind. Like the best tool to use in a CTF is the one that you're most effective with, not necessarily the one that's most popular.
Yeah, I mean, IDA Pro, I mean, maybe if you're a professional CTF firm, but I mean, that's kind of a paid product. And I also don't like it. Binary, I messed up the thing. I should have said Binary Ninja. That's what I'd use for reverse engineering stuff, and I like their product a lot. Like really good. Ghidra, I mean, what was that the NSA tool that they put out?
Yeah.
Some people really like it. I don't. I think it is very clunky, not very user friendly. So once again, it comes down to preference, right? I know plenty of people who use Ghidra and IDA Pro for everything, and I just have my preference with Binary Ninja. So
Yeah, so forensics is another one that's really fun. You'll see memory analysis, the one that'll get some people. Unfortunately, we don't have Kevin on the discussion today, but he's really opposed to steganography stuff, because he's like, it's never used in anything but CTFs, which is not true, but a whole other thing. There are people that are
C2
very
traffic.
passionate.
You'll see it in C2 traffic.
Yeah.
A couple other like things, but I mean, no one's hiding anything in a picture on their desktop. Let's be honest, like
Yeah.
that.
But so like steganography is like one to know and kind of a cool thing. Network traffic analysis, memory analysis, file recovery, all those kinds of basic things will get you hints and potentially flags. Memory analysis specifically is like one that I think is a little tricky to get used to figuring out how to do, whether you're using like WinDebug or depending on what you're trying to do in the memory analysis, or like just dumping memory and looking at the files that you get from those dumps. I'm totally blanking on the file format when you do like a mini dump that it comes out in, because it's technically not a binary, but neither here nor there.
I think it's just a dump file, isn't it?
Is it just a dump file? Is that all it is? It might be all it is.
I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and the network traffic analysis, that's I have much more experience doing that for threat hunting than for CTFs, but definitely something to look at. There's lots of stuff that you can put in headers and those kinds of things for
I mean,
data
stuff I've
and
seen that are kind of interesting is you'll see network traffic flying across, and then you have to recover like a picture, or you have to recover like a video feed, or maybe like a VoIP conversation. I've seen some interesting ones on the network traffic analysis. And then going back to like file recovery, sometimes you'll find like files that will have like a byte just like mixed up at the very top, and you have to fix the bytes and then recover the file. So you'll find like weird things like that. You may find deleted files or files in like your recycling bin that you got to recover. Those are also interesting ones. So once again, you'll find like the file recovery one is actually very, very useful when you're talking about like real world pen tests and red teaming things, because people delete things. I know plenty of people that actually use the recycling bin as like another folder. They just have thousands of things in the recycling bin and they never actually delete it. So if you can get to a user's recycling bin, you'll be very surprised what you find in there, because they just throw things in there and there's just gigs full of stuff.
Yeah, and you're right. I totally wasn't thinking about like the VoIP recovery from a network traffic analysis. I'm so used to inspecting like the net flow and the packet headers and stuff. Yeah, like VoIP recovery is a really popular one for CTFs. Like if you go to Packet Hacking Village, if you've never done any CTFs or anything and you want to just get started, Packet Hacking Village has a really cool one that's like an intro that they'll walk you through as you go do it. And they always have a VoIP recovery one. It's kind of cool. The first time that you like took all these random binary bits that are just flying across the Wireshark and combine them all to be able to replay it into like an actual audio file. So that's always cool. The math nerds.
Yeah, cryptography. I always enjoy these ones. These are fun. Typically, I mean, I don't enjoy when they come up with their own cryptography, like a completely custom cryptography, and you're essentially recreating whatever their algorithm is. Those hurt my brain. But I mean, pretty often you're gonna find some sort of incorporation of cryptography encryption somehow. Like it's something maybe as simple as the flag uses something as like a Caesar cipher, which is just shifting like the letters across. That's all it is. It's using a mod if you're familiar with math. Maybe they're doing some sort of like modern encryption on there, so they're encrypting flags with AES keys, and then you have to find the key and then recover the flag that way. Maybe they're hashing things. Quite often you'll find things that are just like base 64 encoded, or pick your base whatever, base 16 encoded just to mess with you. So you'll find things typically hiding in like those sort of formats throughout. This tends to be like, if you're really good with like Python, this is super helpful. Build a quick script and you're done, instead of having to like figure out how to do this. Another good tool for this specifically is like CyberChef. I love.
That's what I was gonna say.
You're gonna tell CyberChef. I love CyberChef. So I learned recently so I built a lot of CTFs, and I built a CTF earlier this year that we ran, and I didn't realize you could do this. You can script like multiple things and then have it like loop. So I thought it was really creative by building like this thing where it took like the flag and then it reversed it, base 32 encoded, encrypted it, like reversed it again, and did all these things. And then I like looped through that like 15 times or whatever. And I was like, oh, they're gonna have to like write a script to do this. And then at CyberChef, you could actually script it and then loop through. And I was like, oh darn, that was way too easy apparently. So CyberChef is amazing.
Yeah, and I just want to ask which village I mentioned earlier. It was Packet Hacking Village. They do a like over the wire CTF every year. That's just like and I say CT. They have like a real CTF that's like an actual competition, but they also have just like a beginner. I've never done this before. like quote unquote CTF style event. Then they have like volunteers that are walking around. They'll walk you through all the challenges to help you like learn how to do all that stuff. It's a really cool thing. It's one of the very first things I did when I went to DEF CON. Oh man, I don't want to think about how long ago it was.
17.
Yeah, 2017, something like that. Was my first DEF CON, and like it was one of the first villages I went to, and it was very cool. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Sorry to, plug a different village there, guys, but the Red Team Village is also awesome. The Red Team Village didn't exist at that time, so.
Well, and I also end up in Social Engineering Village because I find the phone calls extremely fascinating and hilarious every time. But we can answer those questions later. So
yeah, so binary exploitation is kind of one of the more traditional challenges that you think about, like when you think about just doing hacking in general, of creating a buffer overflow that gets you to remote code execution. They're very popular within CTFs. You'll see all kinds of things from buffer overflows to like format string vulnerabilities, ROP stuff. I don't know that it falls under binary exploitation, but this is where you'll also see things that are not necessarily SQL injection, but like command injection, where there may be an interface that takes a user input, and if you format the input correctly, you can get it to execute the code for you. I don't think we have a section for that, like a slide for that type of exploit, so I think it kind of fits here the best. But you'll just see tons of stuff like this where you're trying to create buffer overflows. Actually, I don't know if they do any use after free vulnerabilities, because those are kind of hard to set up intentionally. But but those kinds of, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add in there. And this is where you'll see like WinDebug and stuff used a lot, or like your IDAPRO, like where you kind of get a blend between like that reverse engineering and like your use of stuff, because you may have to reverse engineer it to be able to see where the lines of code are being executed. Oh, you know what we didn't put in there, although I haven't seen it in a while in a CTF, Anthony, is we should put ILSpy for .NET assemblies.
Yeah, ILSpy would be a good one. I mean, go ahead and talk about it real quick.
Yeah, so ILSpy is like a reverse engineering tool for .NET stuff specifically, because a .NET exe, like if it was written in C#, is actually not a true binary. It's a like in between. It's an intermediary language code. It's fully reversible, but you need a different tool than using like, actually IDA might support C#. I actually haven't tried that, but so I'm not going to say that it can't do it, because I don't know for a fact, because I've never tried. But if I'm doing C# or .NET reverse engineering, I use ILSpy. It's a really useful tool for decompiling .NET stuff and you can like fully decompile it. That doesn't mean that it won't undo obfuscation that's applied to the actual code itself, but it'll undo like just the compilation and that kind of stuff. So it's a super useful tool.
Yeah, and if you're talking about like normal binaries, like C code in that case, that compiled, you can't get the raw code, so you gotta like do some reverse engineering things. Drop it in Binary Ninja. You can use like something like GDB to like go in and run it. Start pulling out like what's happening in memory and start doing all of that stuff that's associated with it. Talking about like all the stuff we talked about thus far, this is probably going to be like, in my opinion, more of the difficult stuff, at least when it comes to not as intuitive if you haven't done it before, just because it requires some like art to it, because you're really like stepping through programs, reading memory. This is where you're doing like you're running tools to like throw in like A's and B's to see like what gets overwritten in the buffer, and then tracking where that is, and then calling that address, and then trying to overwrite that address.
Yeah, and learning another thing that we didn't put on here that we should have is like background information. If you're going to be doing binary exploitation and reverse engineering, it's very helpful to understand the PE file structure, like all the headers and stuff that go into like PE files, to know where all the tables are and where certain things are, because you're going to have to, when you start doing binary exploitation, you may have to do like stuff where you're modifying the memory in a specific location to change like a call table so that it goes where you want to go, and API hooking and all that kind of stuff. So learning the PE file like structure is like a very useful thing if you're going to get into this type of exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of other stuff. Something that like so Anthony put in here miscellaneous and like social engineering. Social engineering um, has its own CTF that it does. But something that I will say that I've seen in CTFs is they'll put in like fake social engineering stuff where like you can call a desk and try and get stuff. And a lot of times there are challenges that are like that. They're kind of red herrings that are meant to be like you'll call the person in the competition and they'll try to keep you on the phone as long as possible to like to waste your time instead of working on the other parts of the CTF. I know they did that a couple of years ago during the Team Fortress CTF thing, where like if you get far enough in the CTF, like your Team Fortress team gets like additional stuff. They had a bunch of challenges that were designed to just distract the CTF team, so they weren't actually achieving things for the Team Fortress people on time. So just that's we have some tips and tricks that we'll go through more, but that kind of just brings up like the social engineering is like sometimes you'll see it in a normal CTF, and a lot of times it's just a red herring to like waste your time. But you'll yeah, then they have like all kinds of programming puzzles and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you have anything that, yeah, same with the physical security tasks. That's another one that they had like that I've seen in CTFs that are meant to be just like a waste your like they'll be like, oh, we'll give you 100 points if you can escape out of these cuffs, and it's meant to just take away one of your teammates for 15 minutes during the CTF instead of actually like getting you like a meaningful amount of points.
Yeah, the physical security ones. I mean, I've incorporated them before. If like everybody's on prem, you could have like a code that goes to like some sort of like online portal of some sort, but it's locked in a box. And they got to pick the lock, or they have to shim the lock. So, I mean, there are real ones, but I mean, you're typically not going to find them too often. I mean, it's kind of hard, especially when you're virtual, to hand out a bunch
Yeah.
of locks for people to go shim. And if you haven't shimmed a lock or any of those things, definitely check that out at DEF CON because it is super easy to shim a lock, and a lot of the easy locks are very easy to pick. Um, some of your high end ones get really hard. I have a bunch of lock picking sets. They're fun. Bunch of tools. This is not an all inclusive list, obviously, but is kind of a thing to get you started. Um, most of these tools, like I'd say, like probably like 90% of these tools are going to come pre-installed on your operating system. We have another slide on like some operating systems to run. I mean, everybody has like their favorite one. You'll see, Kali. You'll see Parrot OS. I've started using Exegol, which is kind of nice. Just don't walk into a CTF with nothing, or don't show up to a CTF or DEF CON with Hannah Montana like Linux, which we have seen before in in a workshop that has nothing installed. You're gonna want to have some sort of tools installed. Otherwise, you're at the liberty of the DEF CON Wi-Fi, which I would not trust.
Well, it's just slow. Yeah, I would not plan on using it during the like to download like gigs of tools and stuff. Yeah, so these are all good tools. I think the next slide is the OS one. Oh, our slide got cut off there. Oh, well. So these are kind of the three main OSs that everyone uses. Kali is like a Debian-based like Ubuntu Linux type of thing. So you could use like a Debian, not Ubuntu, Debian-based Linux. Like go install your own Debian and like redo it. Um, they're really nice because they come pre-installed with a lot of tools. One thing that I would make sure, especially in recent years with Kali, I'm less familiar with Parrot, is testing your tools. And if you're going to update any tools, like Kali's package manager has fallen into a bit of disarray. I don't really know why, but for a while they were sponsoring and like working very closely with a lot of the open source tools they were packaging. And then about 2 years ago, um, they that kind of went away a bit based on decisions that Kali was OffSec was making. And since then, some of the package managers don't work as well as they used to. So you might be better off installing the tools directly from GitHub and understanding how to do that and making sure that you're like pre-flighting all your tools before you go into the CTF, because the last thing you want to be doing is fighting with a package manager. That's just a whole lot of extra time that you don't need to spend when you have like tons of other things to be doing during the CTF. Whoops.
I'll say go back, Jake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to that, like a lot of tools are written in Python. You'll find tons of them. If there's any conflicting like version numbers, they're typically going to upgrade to whatever like the most up to date version of whatever that like package is, which is typically where like breaks things. They also have a bad habit of installing dev versions of Python, which have bugs. So be careful if you're doing that. Like Jake said, downloading tools directly from the source, and then running in virtual environments. Like that tends to be the best way to do it. Like, run Poetry, run your virtual environment, or go to some the reason why I like Exegol, they do everything in Docker, so everything's independent. So if one tool is broken, it's not going to break your entire OS. Since it's all Docker based, it's maybe a little bit of a harder learning curve, but I like Dockers because they're black magic and they work. So
Yeah, the virtual environment part's really important because, like Anthony said, you can create conflicting versions, and once you create that conflict within your image, it becomes very difficult to unentangle it, to the point that a lot of times you're better off just if like you have a snapshot, reverting it. That's actually a good thing to remember, is sometimes you may want to have a snapshot of your box from when you're starting, in case you do decide to go install tools or those kinds of things and you break something, so that you can quickly revert to a working version of your box. You may lose some of the work you're doing, but you can always throw files and stuff onto a USB and then revert your snapshot. But because like I said, once you get the cross contamination between different Python versions being installed and the package managers not knowing which version it's supposed to be calling in your path, it just becomes a nightmare to unentangle. So virtual environments are really important, just to prevent you from having trouble during the event.
can we talk about
So
this one? All right,
what?
go ahead.
Oh,
I'll see if you wanted me to cover it. Go ahead.
no, you can go ahead.
I know we talked about it earlier, like preparation. It always comes down to practice. Like if the first time you do a CTF like Jake is at DEF CON, you're not going to do well. I recommend doing them, playing around with them, kind of get an idea of like what you need to know, what sort of tools you have to have available, because there's challenges. Like they are designed to be difficult, they're designed to be confusing, and they're designed as like puzzles, like mini puzzles. So like that's just kind of how they are. So going in and practicing them and going through like different ways to like do them is extremely important. Um, here's just like a quick list of like things you're gonna find or do with them. So like, go out and do them. That's kind of just how this works. Like you're not gonna learn anything just by sitting around and listening to us talk.
Yeah. Well, you will learn something, just maybe not all the skills you need. Hopefully they learned something today while we've been talking.
Fair.
Hey, so one question I have for you guys on the previous slide is, I think today we're really lucky because there's all these platforms to practice on, right? Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, all those things. That hasn't always been the case, and I think folks are cutting their teeth and they're learning how to do CTFs through those platforms. But when do you think folks are ready to kind of transition from Hack the Box and Try Hack Me and into trying to sign up at conferences and participate in real life CTFs?
So
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, my opinion comes from the way I also approach I used to run triathlon and all that kind of stuff, is that there's a basic level of learning that you should do obviously before you get there. But I don't think there's ever a perfect time where you're like, oh, if you've achieved this level on Hack the Box, then you are 100% ready for a CTF. I think it's better to set an actual date or goal of I want to be ready for DEF CON next year. I want to do those kinds of things and just commit to doing that. And it's okay if you don't do well the first time. That's not the end of the world. It doesn't, we all want to do well, and you may be a little disappointed, but if you're waiting for the perfect time where you're like, I think I can jump in and compete and get third or podium at my first CTF, and that's what you're waiting to be ready for, then you may never end up doing it, versus just kind of committing to doing it and accepting that it may not go well. You may show up and be like, I thought I was ready, and they threw all these challenges at me and I had no idea how to do them. And so now I have all these lessons learned to go back and do, because as much pressure as we put on ourselves, the reality is that a CTF is a pretty low threat environment. If you crash and burn, then the worst thing that comes out of that is that your name is low on the list at the end of the event. There's no real harm done from not doing well in a CTF. Because I know one thing that concerns people about getting ready for CTFs is that a lot of people have been told that making a name at CTFs is a good way to get into the industry and make a name for yourself. Doing bad at your first CTF doesn't mean that you can that all of a sudden you're blacklisted going forward for future CTFs, and that when you do well in future CTFs, they're like, well, did you see how he did the first time? You know, we obviously can't hire, like that's not how it works. Like it's once you start doing well, that's what people care about. So you're not hurting yourself by going to a CTF and not necessarily doing all that well.
Jake, do you hire just off of CTF scores? Was that a
No?
Is that a hiring thing?
Yeah. No, but I know like a lot of people. It is a way to get into the industry and network and meet people, and it does look good on resumes if it is like you have like no history, like no work experience, that kind of stuff. So I just know that's a concern for people. Like, well, what if I go to the CTF because I'm trying to break in and I don't do well? And that's like one of the things that people get hung up on, and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you nailed it. I think that you should try to do one of the team-based ones as early as possible, because doing it on your own is completely different than doing it as a team. Very quickly, you're going to find that like if you have nobody leading the team and nobody like giving tasks out, two people or more are going to end up doing the same task, and you're going to waste time. Or you're all going to sit there and be like, we're all stuck. What do we do? So getting into some sort of like team-based one early on is going to be like extremely important, because if all you ever do is just do them like on your own, 100% different.
Yeah, so this kind of gets into what we were gonna say here. One thing I will say, like I agree with Coin that you should try to get into a team one, but again, I know some people are not necessarily the most outgoing, and like, well, what do I do if I don't have friends that like want to do a CTF with me? How do I make a team? You can show up to a CTF and form teams. Like there's like lots of, like especially at DEF CON and some of the village ones that like, you know, the black badge CTF contest you have to qualify for, so that when you can't quite just show up and make a team. But there's lots of village ones where you can show up and just start sitting down and ask someone if they want to work on the CTF with you and start working that way. But it is okay to compete by yourself. You're probably not going to win, especially if it's one where teams are allowed. Like you're very, very difficult to like be the best when you're competing against 5 people working together and it's just by yourself, just from, you know, the work throughput. But it doesn't mean that you can't compete, because even if you go and you don't have a team, you can't necessarily form the team there because you had to register ahead of time. You'll still meet and talk to people, and the fact that you're there is a way to start meeting and networking with people.
Hack Fortress pretty much always is forming teams. Like they have set teams, but like there's always people standing around. They're like, we're looking for one more. And
Yeah,
I mean,
that's how I got pulled into it. That's the one I got pulled into, was the Hack Fortress one. When I told that story, for I was walking down the hall and they're like, "We had a guy that didn't show up. He's like too hungover. Can you come?" Like, yeah, like Anthony was saying, in terms of actually forming a team, having clear team roles is important. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have like you know, so and so is the person in charge of the team. You just need to have some pre-established way of, especially if you have like a 4-person team, of like breaking ties if like the team's divided on what you should be doing. Like you want to kind of have those things ahead of time. And then diverse skills. And I stole Anthony's thunder a little bit, so I'll let him.
nah,
go
you're all
into it
good.
now.
Go. I got nothing else on the slide.
Okay. So I'll let you take this one.
Oh, thanks. So a couple things to like be able to like think about for like strategies. You know, this is kind of like how I go about it. I also build like a lot of these just for fun nowadays, because that's what we throw in our courses, just because people find them entertaining and they're a good way to like assess challenges. So remember, they're challenges. So when you're on a team, you're got to go through and figure out like what challenges are there, what kind of points are available to them, and then like how difficult they are to do based on your team composition. because sometimes some of them you're going to be like, we got nobody that knows is, whatever this challenge is. Um, we're just going to have to skip that one and focus on these other ones. Or there may be like one that you're like, oh, I could do this, like hacking a satellite, like easy enough, like hack a sat. I got this. And you go in and you go do it. So, figure those out. And also don't get stuck on challenges. Like they give you like, 60 minutes and there's 6 challenges and you're on the first challenge and you're at 20 minutes. You might want to go check out the other ones. So don't waste all your time on just one, because there's typically going to be lots of them that you got to go work through.
So one thing that I will contradict Anthony slightly on, and it's a specific use case. It's a specific use case. That's why, like general advice, like 100% correct to focus like on high value and solvable challenges first. But I have seen a few times where like it's coming down to the wire and it's crunch time, and a team's just been like, screw it, let's go find all of the like low point ones and just knock out like 15 challenges in like the last like half hour, because we know they won't take us very long, and we're stuck on the hard ones, and like that can push them over into like a few slots higher, because you can go just you can achieve those. And it's like, don't ignore them, but like I said, specific use case, not a like niche circumstance. But sometimes it's like useful to be like, okay, we've got like, if we're running out of time and we're low on points, like we've got some set aside easy ones that we can come back to that will just like knock out quickly to get those last 30 points that we need to jump over the team in front of us or whatnot.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I normally start with one of the easy ones to build my confidence, and I reserve all the other easy ones where my confidence is low and I failed all the other challenges. So it's all about strategy.
Yeah, it goes back to the it's a learning event, and like the more you do them, the more you'll get, because there's strategy beyond just the actual hacking to like the actual like structure of like, how are we going to build our team, how are we going to communicate, how are we going to plan our tasks, all that kind of stuff. There's as much strategy going on there as there is actually in the hacking and stuff.
Yeah. So how do you, when you're working with a team, I've never done one as part of a team, so I'm genuinely interested in this, but how do you keep your teammates from going down those proverbial rabbit holes?
Well, that kind of gets into the next part, like communication's key. Like if your team's not communicating, you're going to lose. Like that crosstalk has to happen. If everybody's working independently, you're better off having like 5 or 4 independent teams, because you need to delegate tasks. There may be like a single challenge that has multiple parts, and like you're like, I need you to figure out like whatever this encryption is and get me back whatever that key is, because I need the key for whatever this part is. So that kind of goes back, like me and Jake, prior military guys, like managing small teams and having communication are all key things that we do all the time. So that's what we focus on. So being able to like communicate is great. A lot of people do like some sort of like collaboration tools. I mean, there's tons of them out there. It could be as simple as Slack and Discord, honestly. You could have a OneNote that you share documents in, and make annotations in there. Like it doesn't have to be complicated. Like you could just use something very simple.
I'm a big fan of like chat apps, like this Slack or Discord, or when it's something where it's really easy to reference to people, because you'll get halfway through and someone has started working on a challenge. You're like, wait, Coin, weren't you working on this earlier? Like, I think I know how to fix what you were doing, like, but I can't find what you're doing. And being able to just quickly reference and be like, hey, here's the message where we had like where we were working on that, so that you can quickly refer teammates back. Is really, really useful for tracking and being able to, like, if someone does give up on a challenge because it's just taking too long and someone goes back to it, you can it makes it easier to pick that challenge back up. But going back to managing that team, that is where one of the advantages for teams that have worked together a lot comes from. Because like Anthony and I know each other really well. I'm one of those people that gets really focused on a task and has a hard time moving on when it's something that I'm stuck on. And Anthony knows that. So he knows if like he hasn't heard from me in like 15 minutes or so, that he needs to just be like, hey, Hubble, what are you doing? It's time to move on to something else. And like prod me that way. So like that's one of the advantages of like the teams that have worked together a lot. They get those interactions and know where do I need to keep track of, this person, because I know that this is a weakness in them when we're competing, and those kinds of things. And hopefully you have teams that complement each other so that one person's weakness is covered by another and they can all help each other to build better. But That's a little, those kinds of interactions are a little harder when we form a team like on the spot, because you don't know those people's habits and stuff yet, but you can still get together. And I will say, when you're forming teams on the spot, not being afraid to be the person telling people what to do is really advantageous. That doesn't mean be like overbearing, like, unpleasant person to be around, but a lot of times you'll see uh, one of the things that hurts teams that have just been formed is they sit there and they all kind of look at each other because they don't know what to do and no one's telling them what to do. So everyone just sits there without an idea. So, and especially, cliche a little bit, not all of us are the most extroverted people, so people don't feel like confident speaking up, especially new people when they haven't done it before. So even just being the person of like, I think we should work on these exercises, can get the team moving. And once you get inertia going, then people start opening up and it's much easier to work with people. But getting over that initial just kind of like shyness and everyone being like, what are we supposed to be doing? Being that person willing to step forward and say like, hey, I think we should do this, is really useful for like those on the spot formed teams.
A bunch of introverts at DEF CON. I would never guess this.
So yeah, methodical approach, read carefully. This is the whole like, fifth grade test where the teacher tells you to read the whole test and you get to the end, it says turn in the test without doing anything, type of thing. Those kinds of trip ups exist in the CTF instructions. So reading everything is really useful. I've definitely been guilty of like having basically solved a problem, but not grabbing the flag because I thought I needed to do something else because I didn't read the instructions properly. Setting aside, I don't know if you want to talk about this, Anthony, but setting aside like time during the CTF to actually do research, to go like, hey, we don't know how to do this. Let's go spend 15 minutes researching this concept to see if it's something we can crack or if it's something we just need to totally discard, is really useful. All of your time doesn't have to be just like hammering away directly at the challenge. So I don't know if you have any inputs on that, Anthony.
Maybe not 15 minutes, but sure. Definitely should do some research on things. If it's like you got to decrypt this, and you're sitting there writing your own AES like decryption library, when in reality, if you did a quick search, you could have found there's an easy package you could have done.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things like that you could go do. And I mean, that there's already tools that do the hard part for you, and you thought you had to build it yourself.
Yeah. And then just keeping notes, like we talked about on the previous slide, is really important during the CTF, both for doing like debriefs after the fact to figure out like what went right and what went wrong, as well as just being able to like reference stuff back for other teammates.
Yeah, those walkthroughs don't write themselves.
Yeah. Oh, and then I didn't put it on here, but something that I like to do is either have some VMs set up for tasks that they're not necessarily to do the challenge, but like if you need to use Hydra and do a password spray, or if it's an Active Directory test, you need to do like a PS exec. I like having some boxes set up. You can also leverage TryHack Me to do this. I've done that before too. Set up to go test the tool to make sure that if something's failing, it's not because I have my commands wrong. Like I've definitely had times where I've been doing something and we've been fighting it for like an hour, and then you're like, oh, I'm an idiot, the command's wrong, that's why this wasn't working. So going to a box where you know that it should work, and that if it's failing, it's because something you're doing versus like it's intentionally broken on the range, is like really useful to be able to just go, okay, we're running Hydra. I ran the command that should have worked. I have a box set up for me to do a password spray. Let me check my command and run it and go, okay, it did or didn't work on that box that I know it should work on. Saves you a lot of time of like troubleshooting to try and determine is the issue with the challenge or is the issue with like my tooling. So that's like really useful.
Things not to do. These are always fun.
Oh, you did have it on here. Like when I said like don't overlook the easy points, you had it on here.
I mean, yes, yeah. There's a lot of things to not do. Yeah, I mean, easy points, like I said before, like knocking out one or two to build your confidence and then come back to them is always a good thing. But don't like just completely ignore them. Pretty much, these are all the opposite of things that we talked about thus far. Like, don't ignore hints. Like, don't overcomplicate things like Jake does. Make sure you write things down. So, at the end of the day, like a lot of these CTFs, you'll find like there may be a way to solve things that is super difficult and super hard. And reality is something as easy as typing like strings and then dumping the password, like or the flag right out of it instead of decompiling the entire binary. Um, like there are things like that that pop up, and you waste so much time on those. Because at the end of the day, like time is like the one thing you're fighting against in these things. Um, if it's a week-long CTF, like maybe time is not as much of a problem because you have some breaks in there. But if you only have like an hour to do, Hack Fortress, like you don't have a lot of time to go through things. Actually, I think they're like what, like 15 minutes in reality. They're not very long.
Yeah, no, they're super short. There's something like that.
So
cool.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for doing this. I think we'll give a minute here and see if we get any questions in the chat. And in the meantime, I've got a couple that I came up with ahead of time just in case. So actually, the first one, we'll go with Barrett's question that he put in chat early on. He said, what's your favorite style of CTF?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I mean, I like the mix. So the CTFs I like are like ones that have a network, and I'm attacking the network. I'm moving box to box and collecting flags. I don't like the Jeopardy style where you're doing individual things that nothing's related. I feel like I get a lot of I'll call it a dopamine hit when I'm moving through boxes and I'm exploiting them and I'm getting access. I'm elevating privileges. Like those are the ones that I really like. So it ends up being like a mix. Because typically each box will have like 3 to 4 flags, like an easy to hard one, and they'll have like different point values. When I go and build CTFs, that's typically how I build them also. So that's probably why I enjoyed them so much.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do enjoy the Jeopardy style, but I used to do some defense stuff, especially when we do like attack and defend more style CTFs, like as like military exercises. And being on the defense side, there's like no more fun feeling than finding the guys attacking you and kicking them out of the network and being like, good luck, start all over again. Like that's just a really fun like event when you get to do that to people. So I really enjoy doing that. But I do like Jeopardy ones too, but probably the attack and defend just because I like the defense side is kind of fun when you do get to like go do the like active threat hunting, like for a fact there's someone in the network that you're trying to find and kick them out.
What happens when Jake when they block the attackers block themselves out of the firewall?
Oh yeah, that was I put that on the Ask a Red Team thing. Yeah, we were doing an exercise and the team attacking us tried to put an ACL on the firewall so that we couldn't get into the firewall to kick them out. And they put the ACL on the wrong side of the firewall and locked the entire team out of the network for the rest of the exercise.
It's a good way to screw your team.
Yeah, that'll do it for sure.
It was really funny because that was more of a military exercise than like a true like DEFCON CTF type of thing, but like that was against the ROEs. Like we weren't supposed to do that because obviously it would prevent the attackers from being able to really do anything. So like they came to the debrief like all fired up that we were cheating and stuff. We're like, here's the firewall logs where it shows that it was you guys, and we were not obligated to undo the fact that you guys put that in place.
Yeah, that's great. So if folks are, they're already doing, like I said before, they're already doing Try Hack Me, they're already doing various platforms, and they want to find, where they can sign up for some CTFs other than just showing up at cons. Where can they find information about things that are coming up that they could get involved with?
I think that security CTF subreddit would be the best place I can think of off the top of my head, but that's one that we can take a note and go look some stuff up. I tend to looking for local conferences is also a good way. Well, it's still in the conference world. Like B-Sides puts on tons of stuff everywhere, so they're like a good place to track. I haven't been to any of the DEF CON groups. I would assume that they probably have a good place of tracking stuff, but I haven't. I know those are a little hit or miss. That some of them are like really active and really good, and some of them are kind of they exist on paper, but they meet like maybe once a year type of thing. But I think that security CTF subreddit would probably be the best place to get information on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So last question I have then, and then we'll wrap up. But, elevator pitch time. If you had 30 seconds to give somebody your number one tip for how to succeed at CTFs, what would it be?
I think the number one tip is pre-flighting your build. The number of times that I see people struggling with their tools because they didn't realize that something was updated or changed in the most recent version of the tool. They just downloaded like Kali 2024.3 because that was the newest version, and they showed up without like actually testing the install and stuff. Is probably like the easiest and probably best way to prepare for it, in my opinion. That would be my number one like elevator pitch idea. And I don't know if Anthony's, hopefully I didn't
No,
steal
that
Anthony's thunder.
that kind of that. I mean, of all the things that you have in your control, that's probably the easiest one. Is make sure your tools work.
Okay.
I've seen lots of teams struggle within the first 10 to 15 minutes, and you're like, why? And it's like, well, our tools were broken, or we couldn't do this. And it's like, these are very easy and solvable things.
Yeah,
Like Jake mentioned earlier, is VMs. Like, there's a good reason to run a virtual machine versus running like on your bare metal. Like, say you have Kali Linux, don't go install Kali Linux on your bare metal. Go put it in a virtual machine, because when it breaks, it's not if, it's when. It will break. You can roll back that image, and you're back to a good spot.
Yeah. Also, just like that includes things like testing the Wi-Fi. That's another one I've seen where teams show up for the CTF and they're like, okay, we're all good to go, and then they can't figure out why their machine won't connect to the Wi-Fi because they showed up like 5 minutes before the event started instead of showing up like 15, 20 minutes early and checking that they have internet connections and they can access all their tools and all that kind of stuff. So.
Right. So like many things, preparation is key.
Yep. Always.
Okay. All right. Well, over to you guys for any closing thoughts, and then I'll close this out here.
No, thanks everyone for coming out. I hope this was useful for people. Anthony and I are big fans of everything you guys are doing over at Red Team Village. So thank you for putting everything on. It's been awesome seeing how much you guys have grown in the last few years. I think you're probably one of the biggest villages at the conference now. So that's pretty awesome. So thanks for having us and letting us continue to be involved.
Yeah, of course. And, it goes without saying that we couldn't do it without the support of all of our sponsors. So, from everybody at the Red Team Village, thank you guys for your perennial support. And then last thing I'll say as a bit of a teaser, if you will, we've got some big stuff coming up this year. We've got a much bigger venue, a lot more space, a lot more workshops, a lot more speakers. So really excited about, the Red Team Village this year at DEF CON, and hope to see everybody there. So again, thank you, Coin. Thank you, Hubble. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, out here.